Shalom, and welcome to the Jewish Geography Podcast. Now, given the amount of anti-Semitic hate mail I've been getting just for talking about Judaism, I'm a little wary of wading into politics here, but what can I do? Reality is calling. The terror attacks in Paris demand a response from thoughtful people who have something useful to say. If you do have something you want to say to me, please feel free to email me at aton@rabbiaton.com. Thanks for listening. Enjoy. As a people who know what it feels like to be attacked, not despite what is best in us, but because of what is best in us, as a people who stand on the front line of Western civilization against the crumbling anarchy and despotic Islamic fanaticism of the Middle East, the hearts of the Jewish people are in Paris right now. Now, I have a friend who got a little annoyed with me last night for posting the French flag as my Facebook profile. I want to explain that a little bit, both my choice to post it and why my friend might feel that wasn't such a good thing to do. From a Jewish perspective, we have a complex relationship with France. Throughout the Middle Ages, Jews were repeatedly stripped of property and kicked out of the country whenever the treasury ran low. Then, of course, invited back in to help rebuild the economy, because who's better for the economy than Jews, right? Lather, rinse, repeat, except like a dozen times, sometimes even just 2 or 3 years apart. In the early 1800s, France was among the first countries to offer modern rights to all its citizens. That included full citizenship to Jews, a bit of an about-face for the French. And many French Jews thought this meant that anti-Semitism was a thing of the past and that modernity was the cure. Theodor Herzl, the founder of modern Zionism, was among the first assimilationists to be disillusioned with this worldview about 100 years later, when he was present as a journalist at the Dreyfus trial in the 1890s, in which a French army general was framed for treason, convicted and humiliated because he was Jewish. Herzl witnessed crowds of Frenchmen yelling anti-Semitic slurs as the officers of the court ceremoniously stripped Dreyfus of his sword and other military regalia. If this is how the French treat the most assimilated, the most loyal and French of Jews, how must they feel about the rest of us, huh? Herzl went on to launch the movement of political Zionism. Now, during World War II, the collaborationist Vichy government worked hand-in-hand with the Nazis in sending French Jews to the gas chambers. On the other hand, after World War II, France became one of Israel's best allies in the period between 1948 and 1967, when Israel bombed the Egyptian and Syrian air forces on the ground in June 1967. They were mostly flying French-made Mirage fighter jets. But in the time since then, France has sided more and more over the years with the enemies of Israel, choosing easy access to oil over loyalty to the Jewish people and the Jewish state. And the increasing proportion of French society which is Muslim, and unfortunately, because of that, or at least hand in hand with that, vehemently anti-Israel and largely anti-Semitic as well, has not helped with this trend. In fact, in recent years, it has become dangerous for Jews living in France, as a number of deadly attacks have shown. And so thousands of them have picked up and moved to Israel. Of course, France's loss is our gain. There are lovely little French cafes opening up all over Israel, and they are delicious. But when ISIS chooses its enemies, they are not taking aim at the French because of their ambivalent attitude to Jews and Israel. They take aim at the French because the French are standing up against the expansion of despotic, murderous, religious fanaticism in my part of the world by bombing the Islamic State. They hate the French because of the French love of culture, music, sport, and the good life, which they despise as decadent and sinful. They hate the French because of their religion, Christianity, which even most French don't take very seriously these days. They hate the French because of the highest positive ideals they helped bring to the world, the values of liberty, equality, and brotherhood beyond narrow sectarian boundaries. It is exactly because of what is best in French society that they are a target for the ire of the Islamic State. And it is for these same values, as well as the suffering of innocent people no matter where they are, that today I stand with France and the French people. Now, deep breath, that's for today. But tomorrow, when the French people are no longer in the grip of immediate mourning, I want us all to take down our French flags, take a good hard look in the mirror, and wonder why the murder of 250,000 Syrians has not met with a similar emotional outpouring. I include myself among the guilty here. Partly, I think it's because it's far away and we all identify more with things that are close, things which are culturally similar to us, people that look like us, people that think like us, etc. Partly, I think it's because it's hard to pick sides in that conflict. Assad, the president of Syria, is a monster, and so are the terrorist groups he's fighting against. But the people getting killed are mostly neither. They're just people. And if it turns out that Syrian refugees are partly responsible for the violence in Paris, perhaps the West needs to rethink its ambivalence about letting Arabs kill each other indefinitely. Or perhaps we should get involved in helping the refugees in the first 1,000 kilometers of their trek before they land at the gates of Europe. As an Israeli, I look around and I see all sorts of suffering nearby. I see real, dire poverty just over the border in Jordanian refugee camps. But where I see the swarms of NGO workers and reporters crawling around is in the hills of Judea and Samaria, also known as the West Bank, interviewing Palestinians about how hard their lives are because there is a checkpoint between Ramallah and Bethlehem. It seems Europeans see us Israelis as white enough to care about, but what the Jordanians do to people isn't so important. It's time to expand the bounds of brotherhood to include brown people. Over 200 years after the French Revolution, it's about time, y'all. And also, it's time for French society and modern liberalism in general to rid themselves of the underlying Jew hatred that enables them to condemn Israel for shooting terrorists in the act of murder, while simultaneously mourning in solidarity with the US, France, Britain, or other nations when they are struck by the same people for the same reasons. I hate that this is my reality, but I assume that someday the terrorists will get through with another big attack here in Israel, and a bunch of my brothers and sisters will be lying dead at the hands of some a-hole waving some version of the same Islamist flag that the Islamic State claims as its banner. And I assume that Facebook will not be offering a safety check-in for Israelis or an Israeli flag overlay for people's profile pictures. But I always like to end on a positive note, so here's my hopeful takeaway. It seems that French society is starting to wake up to the reality of their situation and are considering additional security measures like metal detectors at the entrance to malls and the like. It's tragic that this is necessary, but my hope is that as their own fight against Islamist terrorism begins to interrupt their everyday lives, a little spark of sympathy for the Jewish state, for whom their new reality is our same old, will be the beginning of a national change of heart. Perhaps in this struggle against murderous barbarism, the French nation will finally learn to live up to their own ideals. That's all for this episode of the Jewish Geography Podcast. If you like what you're hearing, go ahead and subscribe on iTunes. Just search for Jewish Geography. Or you can subscribe on my website, www.rabbieitan.com. That's RABBIEITAN.com. And follow the podcast link at the top of the page. Thank you for listening, and may we all be blessed with a peaceful week.